All right, Kader, you just passed the PMP a little while ago. You're smiling like normal. Like, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell them a little bit about your background and what you just accomplished.
All right. Hi, I'm Kader. I also go by Dr. G. I live in the
All right,
Washington,
Dr. G.
D.C. area, and
Yep.
I have been in the project management industry for the past 2 decades. So I have over 20 years of project management experience. I started off as a project coordinator with web development projects, then went into project management, then became a program manager, then program director. And in my most recent position, I was actually managing 8 programs and bunch of IT projects for the federal government.
That's awesome. So we have like a lot of these interviews, people are like, I'm coming out of the military or I don't have a lot of experience. This is the opposite side with you. You've got a lot of different experience and a lot of different, areas and programs and projects and all kinds of stuff. So like what made you want to come to the get a PMP to begin with?
So I was in the government contracting industry, and those of you who are in that industry may know that the PMP is one of the most basic requirements for any of the jobs, leadership positions in that industry. So I needed to have a PMP, and in order to move up in my career, and for many years I was able to substitute my experience as a project manager, program manager, and my educational background with the lack of my PMP, so to say. And
Mm-hmm.
having been in the specific teams that I had managed, people already knew me, they knew my abilities. So they kind of made an exception. However, every time the contract was renewed, every couple of years, it became something to go through again. And it was very challenging not having the PMP just to check it off as a basic requirement, in addition to all my qualifications.
Right. That's good. And so like, all right. And then we met through Jimmy, right? Is that Jimmy? That's you met, we're going Jimmy with Agile stuff. And then somehow you came over here. Is that how kind of like the evolution of our relationship started?
Yeah, so Jimmy at Fearless Agility was really awesome. I did
Mm-hmm.
my Scrum Master certification. I did a Scrum Product Owner certification through his training school. I've always
Mm-hmm.
been a big believer in the agile concept of project management. Actually, I was much more into the hybrid concept before it became part of the PMP because I
Right.
felt like the waterfall methodology was always missing out the opportunity of flexibility,
Mm-hmm.
and the agile concept itself was lacking a little bit of the structure that waterfall provides with the documentation. Very important in government related work where you need a
Right.
lot of the documentation to show that you have actually accomplished the work that you're doing, because those are considered contractual deliverables. So I've always been a big fan of Agile, and I met Jimmy and did all these certifications, loved it, and found myself with some extra time on my hand towards the end of this year and decided, hey, Jimmy, who do you think would be a good provider to go through the PMP exam with? And Jimmy had already met me through his classes, and he knew how I learned. So there was familiarity. I really liked how energetic Jimmy was. And he said, let me get back to you. And he literally got back to me 5 minutes later and said, I heard that Scott and his team are really awesome. So
That's
I reached out to Scott, and Scott called me. It was like 9 o'clock in the evening. I was contemplating, should I do it? Should I not do it? So I reached out to him, and he called me right away. And we started talking through, is it worth attempting the PMP again at this point? Or should I just walk away from it and, accept my losses? But the conversation was great. Scott had awesome energy. And I think just talking through the challenges I had in the
mm-hmm.
past with Scott, who really seemed to understand what I had gone through, was very helpful in determining that this was going to be the next attempt. And this was going to be my final attempt. I said to Scott, if I cannot pass it this time, I'm not going to pursue it anymore.
So like let's open up. I mean, if you're comfortable talking about it, I think you might be, is like you've taken it two times before us, right? Is that correct, or one?
Yes.
Two
So
times.
I took the first time. So the first time I went to boot camp, I had
Hmm.
two toddlers at home, and my dad was going through heart surgery that week. It was like the worst timing. I was
Yeah.
exhausted from taking care of little babies. And on top of that, I was so worried about my dad. I didn't really get a chance to focus on the boot camp, but it was the time that, my workplace had allocated for me to take, and it had already been paid. And so I didn't get a chance to get out of that class. And so I had to do it. I didn't really retain much, although in practice, I knew how to do all of those things because I was already writing all these
Hmm.
risk management plans and project management plans and program management plans
Yeah.
and all these different plans. I had been writing them for years, and some of my government clients were actually using them as exemplars. So, the first time I attempted it, it was just like, just went over my head with all
Right.
that person stuff going on. And then the second time, years later, I went back to another round of boot camp and did the boot camp again. And at the time, I had a really um, interesting work environment. My boss was supposed to be my backup. Unfortunately, he was so freaked out that week while I was in boot camp. He kept on calling me and texting me while I was sitting in class because things
Yeah.
were falling apart. He was stressed out, and it didn't work for him to serve as my backup. And then I ended up, again, not being really able to focus much on the class. I was so busy with one
Hmm.
hand, responding to
Yeah.
text messages, and on the other hand, trying to be present in the class. And just that whole learning concept of boot camp was just not something that worked for me in general. It was like so much information cramped up in one week, and then you're supposed to get out of the boot camp and within a few days take the exam. There's so much pressure. You don't really have a lot of time to process anything. And actually, it just didn't work for me at all.
So like okay, so that's good. Like the boot camp didn't work for you. What was different about kind of our approach or the all-in approach? How did you know that like something's different here? Talk to me about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So, one of the things that I really liked was that incremental learning. First of all, the 10-week class, really helped me with staying in the mindset of preparing for the PMP,
Mm-hmm.
which means to me that I was not just cramping in all that information, I was actually processing it. I was able to absorb differently and use all these practice tests to help with the endurance factor. Because come
Mm-hmm.
to find out in your class that my biggest issue was not the lack of understanding of the context or the content and the information, or the lack of ability of
Mm-hmm.
being
Solving,
able
yeah.
to apply the content. The fact was I was lacking endurance to take the
Mm-hmm.
exam. 4 hours of an exam was wearing me out. I couldn't focus. Right, previously I would run out of juice basically.
Yeah,
And
that makes sense.
yeah, and I also didn't, something that people don't understand is, one, I didn't grow up in a society where standardized exams are as common as they are in the US. So I moved to the US as an adult, and English is my fifth language. So for me, all of those things were very big impediments that I hadn't even considered in the past. But this time, I really came in with a different approach. It was really a mindset. This time I wanted to um, not just pass it for professional reasons, but I really wanted to pass the PMP for a personal accomplishment,
Mm.
because this had been such an important part of my career in the past, where people, have used it against me for not having the PMP. I lost out on bonuses. I lost
Mm.
out on opportunities for jobs and different, ways of growing in my career, that I really needed to do this for my personal accomplishment beyond the career aspect. And so the incremental learning, the repetitive learning, and staying in the mindset for 10 weeks and building my stamina and doing the practice tests, 20 questions at a time, then 45 questions, then 60 questions. That was really helpful in helping me plan out how to sustain my energy level so that I
Hmm.
can continue focusing throughout a 4-hour exam. So great way of learning 60 questions and taking that 10-minute planned break, then another 60 questions, then taking a planned break, and then the final
Hmm.
questions. That was really awesome way of helping me prepare for that.
Well, that's awesome. That's really gives a good perspective going from you failed twice, you had a lot going on in life. And I think that's one of the risks with boot camps, other than like the learning style, I think is flawed in the way they teach. It's that if there's any problem during a 4 or 5 day period, which everybody's life is going to have some type of problem. I don't care who they are. It's some, the kids, the family, the whatever. It's going to snow, who knows what. That you're basically in trouble. Whereas if we spread it out and be more flexible, we can be more resilient as we learn. So that's really, really good. Now, were you scared that like this is the last time I get to take it? Like, did you have any kind of fear for the test as you started to prepare or when you went in there?
Totally. I have exam trauma. That's what I explained to Scott because I
Yep.
failed it twice in the past and it was used against me in my career. I came in with an immense amount of fear, not just the fear of not passing it, but it was just this accumulated fear that I had over the years. Even
Hmm.
though I am a really good project manager, program manager, I have a lot of success stories that, show in my career. Unfortunately, I had this mindset of fear involved in passing the exam. And part of my conversation with Scott was actually talking to him about the 5 responses to trauma that happen
Right.
in us as
Yeah.
individuals, the fight and flight and the fawn and flop and all of those things, how we
Right.
deal with trauma. And I was going through all of those things because I was so terrified of taking the exam. And I
Mm.
actually got into this paralysis of
Right.
overthinking it. And so I needed to kind of break through that and doing it in an incremental way by staying in that mindset. Every day, I allocated about 2 hours of time
Okay.
towards the PMP studies. And I took the practice exams and took, watched the videos, played the games. And it was all that accumulation and, repetitive incremental learning that really helped me break through that fear. Especially if you have exam anxiety, just as myself, it can be
Mm.
very difficult to feel like you're ready to do it. You also need to build up your confidence, and this way
Yeah.
was great.
That's good. And I know that sometimes, I mean, I have anxiety as well, and like needles and other things, and all those things. A lot of times I feel very inside myself and very alone in the anxiety. And the more that I like realize that like reaching out to others and talking through things and maybe thinking about the problems that they're having in life and the perspective there gives me a different thing. I still struggle, it's not about me, but like did you lean on the coaches or friends that you met in the class or anything else to help you manage your anxiety and work through it?
So I think it was a combination of all of it. I
Okay.
did the videos on my own time in my
Okay.
own environment where I felt comfortable learning by myself. I go on walks. I love going on walks, on nature walks. So I had my headset on, and I would listen to the videos as I was walking. So
Mhm.
being in that environment that I enjoy and listening to the content was really great. In addition to watching the videos in my own space, and outside of that, the weekly calls that we had at the coaching calls as a group, that was great because we built a lot of community. We celebrated each other. There was a support mechanism going on that was very helpful. And then I became friends with some people in the class, and we were texting and supporting each other, encouraging each other, especially on exam day, that whole weekend leading up to the exam. My PMP
Right.
buddy Kelly was awesome. We
I
texted
know.
each other throughout the whole weekend, encouraging each other and just uplifting and, you know, telling each other that we can do it. And that was really great. So you can't do the PMP in isolation. It really helps learning in a community. And I think your class really provided that.
That's awesome. That's cool. I really, really appreciate it. And I was looking through like different stuff like if you want to talk through, now we might not be experts or anything, but you sent me, I remember you sent me the video. Let me pull it up, or a little picture. Let me pull it up right now. Give me 2 seconds. The trauma responses. And it's kind of like I got it on my phone, but how would one think through these? Because my initial thing when I wrote you back was like, oh, I am this type of person, a fight person. But you kind of like politely corrected me with like, when we feel stress or we feel trauma, it's not one thing, right? Or how should I be thinking about this little circle wheel thing with traumas? How should I be thinking about it?
Sure. So trauma is, of course, a very complex subject that we could talk about for hours. I have a
Mhm.
doctoral degree in post-traumatic growth. I
Okay.
did a lot of years of research in how human beings can move beyond the trauma experience. Interestingly, I find myself applying those findings to my own learning and my own life in many different instances. So when we are exposed to trauma, right, we have, as human beings, we have 5 response mechanisms. And these response mechanisms, the literature basically says either you fight, and that's
Mhm.
your immediate response mechanism, you fight against the trauma, or in that situation, the other one is to flop, you basically play dead. We know that from some
Yeah.
animals.
Yeah.
Um, or you go into a flight response, right?
Mhm.
You might be wanting to run away when you are in that situation. Then there's fawn, and where you are becoming also submissive to the trauma situation that is happening, kind of like Stockholm syndrome types
Right.
of things.
Mhm.
I have my own theory on how we as individuals kind of respond to this aspect
Mhm.
of very traumatic or extreme stressful situations. And that we are not just the one type that the literature generally says we would do. You could be,
Mhm.
if you go through prolonged periods of time where you have extreme stressors that are traumatizing, you could be going through all of these trauma responses at all times,
Mhm.
meaning you could flop in the morning, right? Because you are
Yeah.
dealing with that. And then in the afternoon, you just want to run away. And then in the evening, you want to fight against the trauma that you're
Mhm.
experiencing. So that cycle kind of is repetitive if you are in prolonged chronic trauma situations. And preparing
Right.
for for an exam of such magnitude, especially if it has a lot of importance in your life. Many of us
Mhm.
are very much dependent on, our career situation with the PMP exam. There's a lot of pressure from your boss, your workplace. If you don't do the PMP, you're going to have some kind of negative impact in your career. So there's a lot of pressure, and of course, that ties into your family, being able to be a provider, take care of your family. If you don't have a job, job loss is a huge fear, right? There's
Mhm.
so much pressure and so many fears involved in it. But there's also the personal aspects, right? To me, it seemed like, people who had passed their PMP, they were kind of walking around in my workplace like, oh, hey, I have a PMP, you don't. And that
Yeah.
felt like it was an exclusive club that I didn't belong to. And that was a whole other level of pressure that added to my perception of passing the PMP. So
Right.
for me personally, it was not just the trauma of exam anxiety, but it was also like the entire experience of having and not having that certificate in your repertoire, right? So yeah, lots of emotions that we tie
It's
into
yeah.
it.
And so, like, I
Very,
think I mean, it's the two things or three things come to mind, but I'll go talk through them. First of all, thank you for sharing. And then, like, the insights. One of the things about, like, the community aspect of, like, the way in which we teach and bring people in is, like, it's not a one-way thing. like I just learned and I've learned through it and be able to understand it from like a personal level. I got stabbed when I was 20. I had heart surgery when I was 9. Like everybody has their own things that go on there, but like I've dealt with trauma in the sense of that. And then like the stress of, leading a family and doing other things. And like everybody, like you mentioned, like has the personal side of it, they have the professional side of it, they have like all these different levels. So everybody can kind of see it. It doesn't have to be like, you know, like you were hit by a car, in a mugging or something like that, but it can be like personal things there. So having that perspective and having you contribute that where it's not just a one-way thing, I think it's such a beautiful thing that you were there. So thank you for that. And then secondly, how does one, like, maybe you can only speak for yourself or what you believe for a greater, but you can recognize that like, oh, I'm fighting. So you put a name and an identity toward it, if you will. But what are some skills or ways that people can kind of start to positively, I don't know, I don't even know how to say it, like deal with these things, or how would I think about it? Like,
So the way how I think about it is, I have to work through that experience, and the only way how I can work through it is really with the support system.
okay,
And having, your team, your coaches, and those group calls was very much like one part of the support system. But
okay,
I've very much intentionally integrated self-care during that time.
that's
10
good.
weeks of class, I made sure
Hmm.
I was in a good place, like
Yeah.
mentally, and I was taking my nature walks. I was doing things to help me get through the 10 weeks without giving up, without
Hmm.
feeling too overwhelmed with what was happening, and being able to manage everything else that's happening in life. And
Hmm.
so, good ways of going through this is definitely having a strong support system, be it at home, at work, and with your team's help.
Yep.
Making sure you're in a good space physically, mentally. If you're not feeling well, that is not going to let you be in that mindset where you feel like you can get through this, right? So it's a combination of all of these things. We don't just exist in one way. We are in that integrated holistic environment where we need to be physically, in a good place, emotionally, mentally, support systems in place, and just having positive individuals around you who keep ensuring and repeating that you can do this, because negative self-talk is really part of trauma response or part of trauma processing, and you kind of have to work through that negative self-talk, that
Mm.
chattering monkey that some people call,
Yeah.
um, that tells you you can't do it, or you're not smart enough, you, for whatever reason, whatever that chattering monkey on your shoulder tells you, you kind of
Yeah.
have to figure out ways to silence it, and start having this, maybe a mantra that
Mm.
tells you, I can do this, I can pass this exam. And so I had my own mantra. I have, little post-its that I have on my
Mhm.
desk, and I have my
Mm.
own little mantras. And I kept telling myself every day, um, I'm making myself better every single day. I'm learning how to pass this exam.
That's good. That's really good. So every one of these things I try to like we get a little bit better. And so the last interview I had, we were talking about putting in a model for the simulator where it has like it models the exact interface so it like looks the same so it's not like a shocking of the eye. And so that's really good from the last one. This time like we have the module in our course of like building the unstoppable mind, but I think that we can integrate a little bit more on self-care and sprinkle that through the course to make sure that people are taking, because they want to grind every day, but I don't see them taking a lot of breaks. So like maybe it's like you take a half day break where you're like, I'm just gonna go on a walk. I'm gonna do something that I enjoy doing. I'm gonna play with the kids. I'm gonna do whatever, doing that. And then I like printable mantra cards, that maybe like a couple of them that we could suggest, and then give them some that are like open, and like you write your own and put them out there. As little
Yeah.
things that people might be able to like stick on their wall or on their computer or whatever to remind themselves. I think those are winners because it's like a lot of these interviews are, we talk about technical details of agile, scrum, hybrid, whatever. That's cool. I think this one's just as valuable, if not more valuable, where it's like the mental side and like how you think about yourself as you go through there.
Totally. I mean, self-awareness is really key in how
Mhm.
you process anxiety or, any kind of mental aspect that gets in the way of successfully passing the PMP. So, knowing what works for you is part of the experience. I know for myself, I had to build that endurance, which is something that I realized in class. It's not that I don't know the topic. It's not that I don't know the content or the information. It's the fact that I could not maintain focus for 4 hours at a time. So I had to build stamina and endurance. And in order to do so, it's like running a marathon, right? You have a coach next to you who says, hey, keep going, don't give up. I support a lot of my friends in marathons, and,
Mhm.
we'll stand there and we'll scream, you've got it, being that cheerleader for yourself is super important.
Right. That's good. That's super great. So how did it feel once you went into the exam, like you actually got it done and it said congratulations, you passed. I have the picture, show it later. But like how did you feel when that thing popped up?
All right, so it didn't pop up actually. I came
Okay.
out of the exam, I went to the front desk and I checked out and waited for the lady to print this piece of paper. And I open up the piece of paper, and on there it you kind of see at a high level your scores if you pass
Right.
it or not, right? Actually, it said this specific section um, above or met the
Yeah.
requirements and things
Target
like
or
that.
whatever.
So I was
Yeah.
reading all of those things, and I was looking at the paper. Where does it say if I pass it or not? And then finally, I saw in like this tiny little print where it said passed.
Oh
And
goodness.
I just stood there and I started bawling because it was such a crazy thing that I had. It was like accomplishing, climbing up the Mount Everest almost, right?
Yeah.
I had been trying to do that for so many years, and I kind of didn't manage to pass this exam. And then in that moment, it was done. It was accomplished. And it was such a relief. It was happiness. It was such an undescribable emotional state. I just started bawling, and the lady in front of me says, you need to treat yourself to a really nice drink tonight and a great dinner. You deserve it.
That's good. That's good. So that's really, really good. It's so great to hear like the stories that the students give and that it's always unique, but it's always like heartfelt and it feels good. So like, what is the misconception now that you've been through three times, right? And you were successful and that's all that matters. Who cares about the past in that sense? It's all, I'm gonna take that back. Like I think those like little hiccups that you had, you shouldn't be scared of them or ashamed of them. And I know you're not. Like they are. How do you think about the little hiccups that you when you didn't pass? Do you think positively about the not failing or not passing in the future or in the past? I apologize. Or how do you think about them?
So I think, that's a good question. Um, we really attach a lot of emotions to passing exams and not. So once I
True.
passed the exam, I was looking back, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I allowed these emotions to really make me feel so bad about myself that I was not able to pass this exam in the past. Right.
Right.
So that instant relief and letting go of that attachment to these emotions as to why I hadn't passed the exam in the first place. So that was kind of interesting that we really put a lot of weight on these things. Also,
Right.
reflecting on how much other people put weight into you having a certificate or not.
Mm.
I mean, I have a PhD, but that certificate was still, a much bigger accomplishment than my PhD for many different
For a lot of
reasons.
people,
So,
yeah.
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 And yeah, I
It's
think,
it's yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah,
It's
I don't know.
yeah, I guess I went in there and I fumbled through all of these questions. It's okay. But I was thinking like I was like, oh, just don't care about the past. But then like my son is I have three sons, but one is 10 and he plays baseball and like it's a game of failure where you strike out a lot and you do these things. And like one of the things we're trying to build is that like each one of these challenges is like something to overcome and it's like been placed in our path for a reason. So yeah. So you overcame it,
You
which
know,
is cool. Yeah.
yeah. So the day that I was actually going for to the testing center, I was scrolling through my
Right.
LinkedIn feed, and I saw this little sign that said, "What's meant for you will keep calling."
Right. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I thought of that and I was like, yeah, this PMP exam, it keeps calling. Even
Mhm.
if I don't want it anymore or if I don't need it because of my years of project management experience, it kept calling me. And when I saw that, I was like, I think maybe I'm attaching a spiritual meaning to this. Let's say, it's going to happen and it will open up more pathways to bigger, better career opportunities. And so sometimes it's also timing. What if I had gotten my PMP in the past and, things would have gone differently in my career? I may or may have not, pursued what I'm doing nowadays. But
Right.
we learn from every failure, and you just have to look at it as a stepping stone. If you didn't pass, it's okay. It was not the time. Continue studying, you know, do the best
Mhm.
and keep going, moving forward.
That's really good. Yeah, that's like I don't know how we could do better than that. I think that's a good place to end it on this one, Dr. G. So like I really, really appreciate the insights that you've given us and the perspective on like the study process and the courageousness that people can can take on as they go through it. And that, once you get to the end, you're celebrating, what you've accomplished and you have a new perspective on the whole journey. And I think I'm just super grateful that we were able to help you a little bit and that you're like in our family now. So that's cool. We'll give you, all the PDUs forever. And then like we're having this all in elite thing where we're bringing people back now. It starts January. So we'll love to get your perspective on your career as you go. And I'm sure that we'll all help each other as we go. So thank you again. And do you have any last messages for people out there that are getting ready to start the journey as they come in? What are your thoughts for those folks?
Well, thank you for having me on this interview. Anyone who's joining this class, I wish you well, of course. And make sure you celebrate yourself. Don't just look at it as another test that you have passed. This is a big accomplishment. Once you pass it, it will open up doors, of course. Join PMI.org as a member if you can. They do have a lot of great continued education related events and classes. You know, this is an opportunity for you to continue building on this. I look at the PMP just as a foundation knowledge and
Mm-hmm.
that you can continue building on. So stick to the plan that Scott and his team is providing and have fun.
That's true. That's good. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a great weekend, and this won't be the last time we talk. I'll see you soon.
Sounds great. Awesome. Bye, Scott.
Bye bye. See you.